Hi everybody, welcome to Sprague Woodturning. My name is Jim. If you haven't been here before, this is predominantly a turning channel where each and every week I teach people how to make things on the lathe. If it doesn't go round, I typically don't like to do it, but on occasion I do some flat work. But this week we're going to be making an urn, and this is a commission for Kimberly, and this is for her son Chad. Unfortunately, Chad has passed away, so she's been waiting an extremely long time for this urn to be made for her son, and this week is going to be the week. Over my shoulder here, you'll see a really large piece of cherry burl, so that's what we're going to make Chad's urn from. So let's get over to the bench and we'll discuss the challenges that we're going to be faced with making an urn, a large urn this size. All right, so this is quite a large piece of wood. This has been in my fridge kiln, I would say, for probably close to 2 years. There are some issues with this. There is a big split that goes down here that I'm a little concerned of. What I want to do with this is mount this between centers, basically shape the outside of it after we've cut the lid off of it. This here is going to be lopped off, so you know, this is essentially the burl that we're going to be working with. There are some pretty large splits in the ends of these, so it's best that they come off. But you know, I'm a little concerned about this piece right here, so I don't know. Once we get this cut off, we'll be able to see how deeply this crack goes and if it's safe to turn on the lathe, or if we may be forced to go in a different direction. Anyway, this is cherry burl, and it should be a really nice urn when it's done. Now, when it comes to calculating urn size, 1 cubic inch per pound is basically how it's done. Chad was 210 pounds, and I don't know if he was cremated in a casket or what the deal is. So you have to account for that as well. So if the individual was cremated in a casket, then that's going to add to the volume, whereas a lot of times people are just cremated in essentially cardboard boxes. So I think it's safe that I should make this no less than 230 cubic inches on the inside of this piece, and then that way we're ensured that all of the ashes will go inside. Okay, so what I want to do is cut these ends off here, and then we'll get a better look at this and we'll be able to figure out how we're going to tackle this really strange, out of balance piece of wood. It's probably not going to be any fun to turn on the lathe, that's for sure, since it's so out of balance. So anyway, let's do that. So I know that this looks kind of sketchy to cut on the bandsaw, but it's actually pretty safe. The majority of the weight is down on the bandsaw bed. So yeah, you just got to be careful when you're doing this. But I had to get rid of these ends because they were just cracked so badly, and I didn't have the confidence to mount it between centers. So here I am using the grinder and using the electrical planer to try and plane this down. And basically I sat it on the bench and looked at the orientation of it and kind of figured that this is where I want to flat spot it. This will change. It's not really until you get it mounted between centers that you really can stand back and have a look at it and try and figure out exactly the best way to mount these pieces. But anyway, it is great to be back. I had to take a week off because of a bad knee. I put up a couple of ASMR videos in the meantime, but it is definitely great to be back on the lathe and back in the workshop, because I just don't do well sitting around doing nothing. To be perfectly honest with you, I probably shouldn't even bother trying to grind this thing flat. I thought that, you know, I had it set in my head when it was on the bench, but you know, once it's mounted on the lathe, things may completely change. Trying to get things in better balance, trying to make sure that you preserve as much of the burl as you can, and of course limit how much resin that you're going to require. So, you know, and the other fact that it's got a really deep crack in it is also a concern. So all I'm doing is putting my hands on the ends here to see if it's spaced evenly between the live center and my hands. So, you know, do it on 2 axes here and it should be pretty close. And it looks like it is now. And this makes it out of balance, which will be a problem, but we'll deal with that. It shouldn't be that big of a deal. And but the important thing is to try and get it centered on here best you can. So what I'm going to do now, since I've got all kinds of marks here from the live center and from the drive center, I'm going to mark them, and that way I know that I've got the right one. And then I'll drill a hole and recess these in. Anyway, I'm just going to drill these over on the bench. I'll be right back. I think that's probably going to be as good as we're going to get. All right, so anyway, I know that that was a bit to try and figure out. And as you can see, like my cuts are way off from where I originally had them. So that's no real big deal. The important thing is that this is on here and centered. And I think it's on here centered as good as it's going to get. All right, let me get my gouge sharpened up and we'll be at it. Starting off here with the 5/8 bowl gouge from David Ellsworth, my go-to gouge as far as working with straight wood pieces is concerned. Definitely need to whittle this down. This would have taken, if I had to thrown this into a bucket, if I would have had one large enough, I don't know how many gallons of resin this would have taken. So it's best to at least get this down to a cylinder. I typically don't like to turn these things to their final profile and then do any casting, as you've probably seen here on the channel. So, you know, I'll take it down to a cylinder, and then from there we'll do the casting, and then that way, you know, you're not limiting your options as far as profile is concerned. I'd like to personally thank those who watched the last 2 videos that I put up that were ASMR content. Mixed reviews on it. I realize that a lot of people are here for the voiceover and to get the detail. But you know, I just needed to take a week off and let my knee heal up a bit here so that we could get back on the lathe. So thanks to those who did watch that content. Very mixed reviews. I even had people tell me that they were going to unsubscribe. A little taken back by that. This was just a temporary thing, but some people thought that this was the direction that I was taking my channel in. It is not. I recognize the need for these voiceovers, and these voiceovers are never going to change. For some reason, every time I put up a video like that, people think that my content's going to change, and it is not. So moving forward, you know, I realize that a lot of people like ASMR content. Truthfully, I'm not one of them. I appreciate the editing skills that it takes to make ASMR content. But you know, I recognize the fact that a lot of people want this ASMR content. So in the future, what I'm going to do here is once this video is edited, it's not a huge deal for me to re-edit another ASMR video. And then these videos always go live on Friday, and then probably midweek through the next week, I'll activate the ASMR content. That way, if people want the detail, they can watch this video. And if they don't want the detail, then they can watch the ASMR content when it comes out midweek, following week. There, that is a lot more secure now. With the two drilled recesses where the live center and the drive center were sitting, very unlikely that a piece like this is going to come off the lathe. It can still fly apart. You can see that that crack goes about halfway. The reason why I wasn't overly concerned about that is because there's Burl on the other side of this, and if you know anything about Burl, you can't split Burl. It's if you've ever tried to split one with an axe, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So I was reasonably confident that this was not going to fly apart. So this is kind of why I decided to carry on with this. Now, what are my options here? I could have poured some epoxy down into that crack to solidify things, give it a little bit of insurance. I've also, in the past, taken two large hose clamps and basically turned two tenons on the ends of these pieces and then put these hose clamps around the tenons, and then that way that will also help to hold things together. In this case, it just really wasn't needed, so that's why I proceeded as normal as far as roughing this piece out. I consider this roughing out. Ideally, maybe I should have done this when I first got the Burl. It would have dried faster. But I like to leave these things in their natural state, and then that way it doesn't limit my options moving forward as far as what I can make of this. So with all that said, if you look at my position of my body, I am not standing in front of this. The only time that you'll ever see me stand in front of something like this is, if it's combined with the resin. The shavings that were coming off there were quite abrasive, so that's why I went to put the glove on. Now, whenever I definitely don't recommend turning sketchy wood, but like I said, this to me was solid enough that it wasn't really in that category. But it's best to stay out of the throw of the lathe, which is right directly in front of the piece, because if it does come apart, if you're standing in front of the throw of the lathe, well, yeah, you could get injured. So standing off to the side is your best bet when you're working with pieces like this. And then, of course, once they're combined with the resin, you're good to go from there. I was able to bump the speed up to 475. I think before that, it's like around 300, something like that. It's really out of balance. All right, so here's where we're at. Originally, this was going to be my bottom. I now think that this is going to be my top and this is going to be my bottom. I also was going to cut off a lid and then drill this out. I don't think I'm going to do that. This thing is bone dry. There's just nothing but powder coming off of this. So, I don't think there's really any need to throw this back in the kiln. With these really deep cracks that are going in here, once these are filled with the epoxy, it's going to look really cool. Same thing down in here. I know that she wanted this to be fractal burnt, and because of the issues with fractal burning, I can't do that anymore. But with these deep cracks, it will almost kind of give us the same effect, but with the epoxy. So I think we're late in the day here, so I'm just going to leave this and we'll cast this tomorrow. But there's still lots of stuff to clean out of here, but I mean, look at that burl. Tiny little eyes. absolutely beautiful stuff. And you know how my business has changed so much. These cracks would have been just absolutely, I would have been upset to have these cracks in my work. Now, of course, when it's combined with the epoxy, they look fantastic. We're going to leave this till tomorrow, and we'll do the epoxy. See you then. So this is in fact the next day, and I'm just using the brass coated brush mounted in the drill to clean up this this piece of wood. It was hard to get deep down inside of the little major cracked area there, but eventually I did get it, and blowing this thing out really well is another important thing prior to casting. That way you don't have any floaty stuff in the resin, which nobody cares for. Now that that's done, I'm just going to trim away the tenon that's here, because I'm going to make a mold and sit this upright, and then that way we can cast it. Very light cuts here. This could easily get ripped out of the jaws of the chuck. Right, we're going to use some more of this shelf lining material that I got at Costco. It's part of our mold anyway. I don't really want this on here super tight because I want the resin to be able to flow around it. So I've learned from my mistakes, if you attach this kind of stuff too tight to the piece you're working on, the resin will have a hard time flowing around it, and you may end up with some voids that don't get filled. So leave yourself just a little bit of slack, even if it's say a 1/16 of an inch, then that way you won't have any issues when it comes to casting this, in theory. All right, so we're just going to use a small little piece of melamine here. I did cut this 1/4 inch spacer. I should have just left the piece on the bottom, but after looking at these cracks and how they don't come all the way out to the ends, I figured it would be best to put a spacer on the bottom. So that's why that's there. I think what I'll do is glue this in place so it doesn't move around. Whenever I make pieces like this or molds like this, I really use a lot of hot melt glue. That way, you know, in most cases you're assured that it's not going to fail after the epoxy goes in. Then I'm going to let that harden up, and then I'm going to give it another bead of glue around here, and then hopefully this is not going to leak. Anyway, I'll bring you back when we're getting ready to mix up some resin. This week we're going to be using deep casting epoxy from Designer Epoxy. There isn't a lot of epoxy in this piece, but there certainly was enough volume there where you definitely would need a deep casting epoxy. And she requested that we use emerald green for Chad's urn. And of course, emerald green is a favorite of mine and a fan favorite of most of the people that watch my channel too. Don't forget to scrape them sidewalls and the bottom of your buckets too. All right, here's your first 1.5 liters. Really hope this thing doesn't leak. I'm surprised that it only took that. Just checking for leaks. I don't see any. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. I'm going to mix up the same amount because we're going to throw this in the vacuum chamber, and I know for a fact that this level is going to drop off after that, so it's not going to go to waste. I'll be right back. All right, here we go. Let's see how we make out here. I don't see any leaks as of yet. I see this as a crucial step, and I do highly recommend getting a vacuum chamber if you plan on doing any resin casting. Without this, I can't say for sure that all of those splits and cracks and voids would have been filled in. And the other thing too, with typically cherry burl anyway, those small tight little burl eyes, a lot of times they're kind of hollow in the center. So by using the vacuum chamber here, you're hoping that that's going to actually fill in those areas as well. So it's not, you're not just worried about cracks and voids here, you're also worried about these small little divots that you will typically see in cherry burl, the cherry burl that I've dealt with anyway. I did use the torch there to try and get rid of some of these bubbles because I was just having, I like to cycle this on and off, and anyway, I was just having all kinds of issues with doing so. So by using the torch, I was hoping to get rid of those bubbles that would help us out in that regard. Anyway, that's only 18 inches of vacuum. I can't pull any more than that. I'm going to keep doing this for about another half hour or so, and I'll bring you back when we're ready to go into the pressure pot. Well, all right, ever since I shut the camera off, I've been in full-on panic mode because the mold failed, and all the epoxy is sitting down inside of here. so we don't waste this epoxy. What I've done for the last 45 minutes in a hurry was go through my old bottle stopper stock, and I had a bunch of spalted maple little stoppers that, you know, I don't do bottle stoppers anymore, and these need to be stabilized, and you know, it's not in my business model anymore. So I'm going to take this epoxy, put it in here, and hopefully we'll save the epoxy. Just one of those days, That's just an old piece of hardboard that's already saturated with the epoxy. Does everybody remember Dwayne? Haven't used Dwayne in a while. And those are just all in there, totally random, no pattern at all. I just need to get this done before this epoxy starts to set up here. Now this is probably going to be very, very messy. What is the best way to do this? Yeah, I don't know. It is it is so hard to hold on to. It is slick as can be. That'll have to do for now. Yeah, we might even have to mix up more. All right, I'm going to quickly do that. I'm going to mix up another liter and a half of this. The problem with these branches, of course, they're very punky and they are going to soak up a lot of this epoxy. So I'll be right back. All right, so here's another liter and a half. And it will use probably every bit of that. Oh, okay. Oh man, what a mess. So I think I was watching this and it looks to me that it failed on the bottom here. So, you know, I'm just going to leave this the way it is, and whatever epoxy is in there, it'll continue to weep out of this piece, should solidify and seal this bottom. And then we'll make a call from there if we're going to keep it or not, I don't know. Maybe I'll just mix up a little bit of it next time and see if it leaks. And if it doesn't, then I think we're probably safe to pour. Regardless, I'm going to get this into, oh, see, well, there you go. Look at that. The whole thing is moving. I wonder if it's because I use that melamine. Regardless, I think that it still will work. I just got to get it into my clean room, but it's going to be pretty nasty to do that. Anyway, this will go into the pressure pot, and I think we'll probably do this at a later date. My focus is still on this. I'm a little bit ahead here this week, so hopefully we've got enough time to carry on with this. So anyway, I'll let you know in the next scene. It's definitely heavy. All right, well, it's 3 days later. Why 3 days? Just, well, I had other stuff on the go, so I just haven't been able to get at this again. What I've done is taken some Gorilla Tape and put it on the seam, even though I don't think that that's where it was leaking. I think it was leaking at the very bottom. But all that resin down in there has cured, and I'll be shocked if it leaks. Shouldn't be shocked, but it looks like it's sealed up nicely. I mean, this is nice and rigid. So I'm going to risk it. The other thing too is, just aside for a second. Now, when I was showing, like, you know, Designer Epoxy has a whole bunch of greens, and I was showing Kimberly all the different greens. Well, this is the old original emerald green that I really like. And this is the new one. And I was using the new one in the mix, but they're very different. So, you know, I'm sure that Designer Epoxy isn't the only manufacturer that does that, where they change up the formula a little bit. So just keep that in mind if you're ordering pigments, because you may end up getting something that's completely different from the original one that you have. Anyway, this is the one that we're going to go with because this is the one that she selected, and I have lots of it to do that. So let's mix up some more resin. All right, so what I'm going to do is just pour a little bit of this epoxy in so that it covers the bottom, and then I'm going to wait and see if it leaks or not. If it doesn't leak, then I'll proceed. But, you know, I'm going to give it a good solid 10 minutes or so. Then I'll just take I don't know, like a white Kleenex and go down and wipe it and see if there's any green on it. If there isn't, then we'll be able to proceed with the rest of the pour. But I don't know, I'm a little worried at this point because it hasn't gone well so far. But I'm going to give it 10 minutes and we'll be right back. So, all right, what I got here is a white tissue. It's been 10 minutes, so let's hope this comes up clean. I think we're good. Whew. All right, let's carry on here with the pour then. All right, I'll mix up a little bit more and I'll be right back. All right, here's another 3/4 of a liter. We're going to throw this in the vacuum chamber like we originally planned to do. And we'll go from there. Anyway, that's next. Now, luckily this time around, things go a lot smoother. I think that it is advisable, if you are going to do resin casting, that you have a casting that's ready to have the epoxy put into it in case you have a problem like this. And, you know, I probably should have had something ready to go because, well, I just wasn't overly confident on the mold, as you probably could tell by my voice. Luckily, Deepcast has 2 hours of open time, so I was able to save it. All right, that's been 45 minutes, so I'm just going to release the vacuum here and throw this in the pressure pot. All right, I don't think I'm going to put any more in there than that. There's a decent reservoir. I got a little bit left over. Throw that in there. And this will go in the pressure pot for 72 hours. And we'll see you then. Well, good morning. Actually, I guess it's afternoon. We are all ready. As you can see, the mold didn't give away this time, so happy days about that. We are going to have one heck of a mess to clean up down inside of here, though. Yeah, I was off for probably the better part of a week with a bad knee. It, for the most part, is back to where it was before, so I'm ready to get back on the lathe because, well, I've missed it. Anyway, let's get this out of here and see what we're looking at. I know that somebody in the past has mentioned about using these for casting, and I really like the fact that they're flexible so you can get your castings out quite easily. But it's got such a taper on it that it's really hard to make anything with a mold like this because you're just wasting a lot of resin. If you're something a little lower down inside, that's probably not so bad. So we will see this in the future more, but because of this taper, I just don't use it all that much. I didn't expect that to come off. Might make a good base for something in the future. Now I know this looks way off, but the wood shifted in the casting, so that's why we've got a big heavy resin pocket on one side and wood on the other. So hopefully when this is whittled down, it'll match the wood at the same time. Starting off with the number 3 Hercules from Hunter Tool Systems, and as you can see, the RPM is 475. Again, I keep getting questions about RPM and what RPM I should be turning at, and you know, I've covered this a number of times. Put the piece on the lathe, dial up the speed. If you have a variable speed lathe like I do, once it vibrates, back it off till it stops vibrating, and then from there, carry on turning. That's pretty much the only way that I've ever done it my whole turning career. Of course, the smaller diameter an object is, the higher the speed. The larger the diameter, the slower the speed. Because keep in mind that if something is, say, 1,000 RPM, that is 1,000 RPM at the spindle, the very center of the spindle. The further you move away from the spindle in diameter, the surface speed increases. So keep that in mind when you're working on pieces like this. So why did this mold fail? I think what happened is this. I have kind of a sheet of this melamine. I cut it up and I didn't clean the surface of it. I wiped my hand across it to get the dust off it, and what I think happened was I didn't clean it good enough. So if I had to use, say, some denatured alcohol on it and then glued the shelf lining material to it, I think that we would have been okay. And I believe that this is probably the main reason why it failed. By all means, you can leave your comment down below. I typically don't use melamine for molds all that often. I think that if I had to just use some straight up plywood, that we would not have had this problem. But regardless, we got it done eventually, and but it was definitely a trick getting there. That's for sure. Trick? Well, that's what we'll call it this time. And there's our first real indication as to how this is going to look. Green with this cherry burl is definitely a hit. Blue would have been certainly very nice as well. Even black. And black is a very neutral decor color, so black goes with anything. But this green is certainly fitting for Chad's urn. So the weekly house, well, this would be your 2-week weekly house update. If you don't know what I'm talking about, my wife and I are selling our current home here in Eastern Ontario, Canada, and moving to the east coast of Canada to our home province of New Brunswick. And we plan on building a new house and a new workshop on family land. Now, the last time I talked to you guys in a voiceover was 2 weeks ago, and that Friday we had a showing, and it actually looked very positive, and we thought that this could be the one, and then for whatever reason, no offer ever came. So we're getting used to it now. It's not something that we want to get used to, because we definitely want to move on with our lives, but of course we've got to wait for the right person to come along. So this is Thursday that I'm doing this voiceover, and we do have a showing today. So we'll have to see how that goes, and of course if there's any news I will share it through the community tab probably on Friday. But anyway, keep your fingers crossed, people. We need it. So basically all I'm doing here is relieving this tenon of the epoxy, and of course I have 2 tenons on the top and on the bottom of this piece. The reason for that is when I cut what will be the lid off, then of course I've already got a tenon to grab it. So that's the main reason for the 2 tenons. To be perfectly honest with you, this urn could have gone in either direction, and it probably would have looked fine either way. Anyway, can't go wrong with cherry burl. It is one of my favorite burls to work with. Now in the next clip, I'm going to show you the reason why I wear a glove when I initially start turning epoxy on the lathe. Some people question why I wear a glove, and this is a good example as to why I do. These pieces are very sharp, and they can cut you quite easily when it comes off the lathe. And if you're curious, my lathe is way over there. So these pieces fly completely through the shop, and this is why I wear a glove, usually when I start turning pieces that haven't been trued up yet. Alright, so you've seen me turn a tenon here. I still need to refine that. This is going to be our top, and this is going to be our bottom. It's going to be really nice to have this seam running completely through it. It goes quite deep into the casting, so that'll be nice. And I think this resin pocket should still be quite a bit of it left over once we turn away a lot of the bottom of this, because we have to give this some taper. And I'm just going to be going for a classic urn shape here. So we'll taper this off. I'll part this off here, about somewhere around there, and then we'll get the corn out the body. Just need to crispen up the tenon on here, that way I can grab this with the chuck, and I guess I can make it smaller now. I'll be able to use the smaller jaws of the chuck. And I am going to incorporate a tenon on the very bottom of this. That way we don't have to mess around with any glue blocks, because this is nice and deep, so I think we've got the room to do so. So that's my plan. What do you think of our piece of wood? This cherry burl is absolutely fantastic. It's beautiful. Love that all these little areas have been filled in. Beautiful. And the resin, well, once polished, is going to look really nice too. All right, let's get to it. Finally able to bump the speed up to 750. I don't think we go above that. I don't think there was any need to go above that. Everything was turning quite nicely. So like I said earlier, I'm just going to crispen up the edges here on this tenon. Then we'll move to the other side of the urn and do the same thing. Basically turn another tenon and make sure that the edges are nice and crisp when they go into the jaws so that they fit really nicely. So speaking of jaws, I did order some replacement jaws for my my stronghold. And it is, I got some tower jaws, and I got some, believe it or not, some dovetail jaws. Now, I did not think that One Way sold these jaws, because they're called smooth jaws on their website. And so anyway, I was talking to the lady at One Way when I was putting my order in, and I said, "How come you guys don't sell dovetail jaws?" And she goes, "Well, we do." I said, "Well, they're not listed in your area where the chucks are." And she goes, "Well, no, they don't call them that. They call them the smooth jaws." And I said, "Oh, okay. Hopefully they correct that, because I thought it was strange that One Way didn't have dovetail jaws." So, and kind of ironic, when the box arrived, it said dovetail jaws on it. So, I think they just need to update their website. So anyway, I know there was a bunch of people suggested buying the dovetail jaws and the tower jaws. So now I have both, and I bought 2 sizes. So I'll have lots of options as far as fixing things to the lathe. So there's the bottom of our urn. Well, we're getting there anyway. There's still a lot more to be whittled away. Now I want to cut the lid off. That's what I'm doing here now. And you'll also see me break out the Sawzall and finish it off after that. In regards to the Sawzall, I've removed the aggressive wood blade because I find it to be just too aggressive. And that is a metal blade, and it cuts perfectly fine, and it leaves you a smoother cut when you're done with it. But you can see, because I believe, there's still some voids and cracks that didn't get filled. And I think that what happened was, on the initial pour, that epoxy, of course, set 3 days later, and it may have sealed off some areas, preventing the epoxy from getting to them. So, if things had have gone the way that they should have gone the first time around, I don't think, I think that the majority of these cracks would have been filled in. But keep in mind that if there's no place for the epoxy to get to these cracks, then obviously they're going to be there afterwards. And, it's just one of these things that you have to be prepared for, because it's pretty rare that I'll turn a piece of wood that's as thick as this is and see that the epoxy has wicked in and solidified and all the voids and cracks in that piece. Very, very rare that you're going to see that. As you can see, I'm using the larger jaws in the stronghold here, and just cutting in the little foot area right now. And it's good to work with pieces where, you've got, there was plenty of size here, so I could incorporate a tenon in the bottom of this and not really be too worried about the piece of wood that you're working on itself. Of course, I still think that my glue block method is certainly a good method to use here. And I could have used a much larger glue block and then stuck it on the bottom of this piece, and I think that it would be perfectly fine. But, if you can incorporate a tenon in the piece, that is preferred. And I was able to get a good bite on it with the chuck this time around, so I was quite confident that it wasn't going to come out of the lathe or off the lathe. So happy days for that, because we haven't had much luck recently. Okay, we got some filling to do in these pieces, and I figured I would do it before I quit here at the end of the day. All kinds of little voids here. Really can't be helped. So what I've done is taken a little bit of the emerald green and mixed it in some Starbond thin, and we'll use some accelerator to set it, and that way we'll be ready to go tomorrow morning. Other than filling that large crack with the UV resin, that was about it as far as options were concerned. Some of these really fine, small little cracks, there was no point in using the UV resin, because you would have had a very hard time curing it. That would be the first problem. And the second problem would be getting it deep enough down inside of it to seal up the crack, because it's, you know, it's a lot thicker than this thin CA glue is. So, you know, I really like the UV resin from Designer Epoxy and highly recommend getting it, but you definitely need to have another option when it comes to dealing with pieces like this and small fine cracks. There, I'm sure that that will not be the last time that we need to do this. All right, that's it. I want to get off my feet, put my legs up, give my knee a break. See you guys tomorrow. So this is in fact the next day. So we're just going to clean up this CA glue. I think that I did this 2 or 3 times off camera. I don't bother showing it again, as this video was getting super long as it was. And so anyway, once we get this cleaned up, we will drill it out and start coring out the body. So while we're watching that happen, I just want to pass on that Designer Epoxy again is having a Father's Day sale. So this is, again, my code won't work during this time. Anyway, they want me to pass this on. Lots of freebies. Deep cast is on sale. Art cast is on sale. With your order, you're going to get a large Helix mixer paddle, 2 silicone mixers, 10 free color bags, and free shipping within continental USA and Canada. So that's a fantastic deal. And of course, my code isn't going to work during that time frame, because you get a better deal with the current sale than you get with my code. Check it out. All right, we're all set up and ready for hollowing. This is the one-way captive system from oneway.ca with my modified laser setup. And this week we're going to be trying the 1/4-inch retrofit tool. I put the 3/16 on there to show you the difference there is, and it is quite a difference. I did have to drill out the inside of the clamp in order to get the bolt in there, but really looking forward to a larger cutter. Maybe to be faster, maybe it's going to be too aggressive. I also got some other cutters from Hunter Tools as well that we're going to try. Don't know if we'll get to them on this video, but very interested to try some different stuff with the cutters from Hunter Tools. Yeah, hopefully we're going to be able to stick with the large boring bar, and if I have to, maybe put the extender on the end of this so that we can finish out this without swapping out this large boring bar. Okay, that's it. Let's do it. I should mention, I also got steady rest in. No tape, as you can see. Hopefully that's not an issue. I thought it would be in my best interest to open up the opening a little larger, to give a little bit more room for the larger retrofit tool to fit in there. And there is quite a size difference between the two of them. So this thing will hog out a lot of material very quickly, and it is aggressive. So you have to be careful with it. One false move and you could go through the side of something with it. But, you know, after using this, I'm really impressed with it, and I wish they had sent me this one first. I think the smaller cutter certainly will be used later on down the road. I could shorten this a little bit, but I do like the length of it. It gives you a lot more reach to the left as far as opening up the form is concerned. And, you know, the fact that it's got a new cutter on it, I mean, I had to be really careful with this. But, you know, it left a really, really nice cut on the inside of this, and I must say I'm really impressed. He sent me a larger one to try as well, and one with a round shaft. So I never got around to using either one of those, but I certainly will in an upcoming video. I'm especially looking forward to using the round shaft one so that you can basically put the cutter vertically, and that way you should get a really decent shear cut. So, but in either case, I mean, this larger 1/4-inch retrofit tool worked fantastic. and I didn't really see the need to switch out to anything else, so that's why I didn't. But I think that may have a lot to do with the fact that this is predominantly end grain. So in the future, when we get into some other burls, I definitely think that I'm going to have to use that other cutter with the round shaft. All right, let's get a look inside here before we move on to sanding. I must say the larger retrofit tool seems to work quite well. It is aggressive. You got to really watch it, but you know, I'm reasonably happy with that surface. It's pretty nice. Sanding next. As you can see, I've got the extension on the drill and I'm using the 3.5-inch stipple disc here, and I'm sanding from 60 to 180 because we're going to do a resin coat like I normally have been doing with these pieces. Very important on this piece to seal up all of this end grain, so that's another reason to throw in the epoxy here. That'll strengthen the end grain in the bottom and whatever end grain there is on the very top of the piece. So we're just going to give this, so once the sanding was done on the inside, moved to the outside, did a final scraping with that, and then moved on to sanding with that. And again, I just sanded it from 60 to 180 on the outside of this piece due to the fact that the resin coat, there's no point in going any higher than that because it's going to be sanded back the next day anyway. So now I'm going to be working on the underside of the lid. So I've got this mounted outboard in my stronghold, and of course, if you remember, there's a tenon on the top of that, so that was the main reason why I left that there. So once we get this down size wise, we'll be able to size this up to the body of the urn to make sure that we've got a snug fit. And I'm going to be using a freshly sharpened parting tool here, and you definitely want, when you're cutting in tenons that are going to fit inside of, say, the body of an urn, or really it's going to fit inside of anything that you're making, you definitely want to have a freshly sharpened parting tool. That way you get a nice crisp edge without any tear out, because you know you really don't want to sand these tenons, because if you do, then the tenon is going to be too small when it fits inside of the urn. Just going to take last few couple of cuts here just to size the lid properly, and then just like the body of the urn, the underside of the lid was sanded from 60 to 180 as well, using the 3.5-inch stipple discs. Now I could have used my vacuum chuck to hold this, but you know, this tenon is going down inside of the urn and really nobody's going to see it. So if it's got some bite marks in it from the chuck, I don't really see that as a negative. What I'm concerned about is it coming off the lathe. So, you know, this is certainly the more safer way to do this. And then it was sanded to 180 as well, prior to having a look at it to make sure everything's good before the epoxy goes on. Well, there you go. I'm very happy with that form. Should be lots of volume there. This foot could be a little bit smaller, but I don't think that that's advisable. I think this is waste. We're gonna get rid of this. I think that this foot is the appropriate size for this. You don't want it to be top heavy and easy to knock over. I like the way the lid fits awesome, nice and tight right now, so very happy with that. All right, as per normal, this is 3 ounces of the Pro Series, and we'll use this to seal up any little cracks or voids that may be inside this piece. Then we'll do the outside and the top as well. There, I'll leave it like that for about 5 minutes, then we'll put it back on the lathe and we'll do the outside. People ask if they can use art cast for this, and you certainly can. One of the reasons why I like to use the Pro Series is because the Pro Series is a 2-to-1 resin, and 2-to-1 resins are typically thinner than 1-to-1 resins, which art cast is. But yes, art cast is an option here as well. There you go. Beautiful burl. You cannot go wrong with cherry burl. Lots of bubbles coming. There's lots of little holes in where the burl is, so that's typically what you'll see with cherry burl anyway. Man, I love this. Love this resin and I love this burl. Little knot. Beauty. All right, let's put some epoxy on the lid. I wasn't going to mount this on the lathe. I figured just doing it by hand would be good enough for the initial coat. No need to overcomplicate things, as they say. Well, there you go. Not a whole lot going on here. It is important to really coat this end grain though. And then hopefully we'll only take a couple of coats of Waterlux on top of this, and then it'll be ready to go. All right, we'll see you tomorrow for the first coat of Waterlux. Well, good morning. It is the next day. The epoxy looks like it's done a really good job filling in all of those spots. There are a few dry spots here and there, but overall, it looks like it's done a really good job. It's pulled a little bit down there in the base. That's good. That'll strengthen that end grain. And anyway, it looks pretty good. Anyway, I'm going to start setting this at 180. We'll go all the way to 800. Buff it with Triple E and clean it with the denatured alcohol and get our first coat finish on. I was quite surprised that all of the voids and holes were filled. I thought that for sure that I would need to do another filling on this with just some CA glue, but I didn't, and I was quite happy about that. Once the sanding was done to 800, of course, this is the Triple E buffing compound from the Beal buffing system. And then when that's done, we'll clean it up with some denatured alcohol and get our first coat finish on. Yuck. All right, here is the first coat of Waterlux Gloss. So there it is in its first coat of Waterlux. Probably not a big difference to you guys. I can just tell that it's a lot flatter. Nice bit of resin there. The eyes on the burl look like they're all filled in, so I'm very happy with that. Even if this doesn't need 3 coats, I'm going to give it to it anyway. Not going to do anything else on the inside. That is sealed up well. I don't really see the need to. Anyway, let me know in the comments what you think. Lid is next. Same deal as the body of the urn. Sand it to 800, then buffed it with a Triple E and clean it with the denatured alcohol. Just showing where the drips came down. And so in order to really clean that up effectively, I mounted it on the vacuum chuck, centered it as best I could, and then used again a freshly sharpened parting tool just to clean that up. And if you're using a freshly sharpened parting tool, you know, there really will be very little sanding to do because it will leave behind a really nice finish. Well, you know what I mean. And as far as the bottom of the lid is concerned, I only sanded 400. I didn't see any need to go any higher than that. Well, there's the lid. Nothing too spectacular about that. I did use the jaws just on the end of it so I could get finish up underneath of it. So, you know, this will take at least 2 more coats. And then I'll be able to do the very bottom of this, but it's all sealed with the epoxy, so I'm, you know, not real concerned about it. Not really much for resin in this either. So after 3 coats of Waterlux, we're finally ready to do the bottom on this urn. I cut a bunch of footage out of here because it took a very long time to get this centered correctly. And it also took a long time to whittle this down. So, you know, I figured that it was probably best not to show all of this because, well, this video is too long as it is. But anyway, I'm just using the bowl gouge to whittle this down. And then eventually we'll start sanding this with the 3.5-inch stipple discs. This, I didn't do any epoxy on this, but you'll see coming up here very shortly that I did make a little dam essentially around the bottom of this after it was sanded to 180, and then just use some duct tape to make a dam, and that way I could pour a bunch of thin CA glue on the bottom of this, and that'll seal up that end grain on the very bottom. There it is there. So one thing that I'd like to do is thank everybody that has watched the video all the way through. I really do appreciate it. And along with that, thanks to the membership. I know that I haven't really been putting out much content for you guys, but I do really appreciate you supporting me. And also, I like to personally thank everybody that has sent me well wishes. I really do appreciate it. Let's have a last little chat about this beautiful urn. All right, let's have a last little chat about this urn. I will say that this is one of the nicest ones that I've made. And I'm not just saying that. I know that I made 3 box elder Burl. Actually, I think, yeah, 3 box elder Burl urns. And this is right up there with them. That cherry Burl is absolutely beautiful. And I'll show the rotating footage at the end like I usually do. The emerald green with this is a perfect match as well. 3 coats of Waterlux. Here is the lid. I did manage to get 3 coats on this, but I didn't get any on the inside, so that will still need another 3 coats of finish before it goes to its new home. Here is the very bottom. And as per normal, there's no finish on there because I'm out of time because it's Thursday. So this piece is 7 3/4 at its widest dimension across, and 9.5 from the very bottom to the very top of the top. I did measure the volume on this, and this will fit 220 pounds, so we should be good there. And hopefully Kimberly and her family really like this. It was challenging to make at times and just didn't want to cooperate, but in the end, I think that it is one of the nicest urns that I've ever made. I will also say that, you know, when somebody gets a hold of you that says, I'd like for you to make an urn for my loved one, I mean, to me, that's an honor. So thank you for selecting me for that, Kimberly. And it was an honor to make these urns. To have a loved one, their final resting place, be made by something that I've made is very, well, it's very humbling. So thank you very much. All right, so don't forget about the sale for designer epoxy. If you've been debating on trying it, I mean, it's a fantastic price, so by all means check them out this weekend. Sale started today. Next week is going to be the resin from this one that didn't make it the first time around. And I've done some other things to it. It's still just come out of the casting stage, but so far it looks good. All right, well, that's it. Take care, stay safe. Don't forget the bell. Please share my videos with your friends. That is the largest way for me to build my presence here on YouTube. I would really appreciate it. See you next week.